miles from Manassas is the Bull Run battlefield. Bull Run is the site of the American Civil War's first battle, which, in all honesty, is only a few days shy of exactly 155 years ago. I had never visited a Civil War battlefield before, and something as I was out there was calling me to that place. To be witness to that part of American history. Now, the American Civil War was a war that pitted the southern states which seceded to form the Confederate States of America in 1861 against northern states who remained as the United States of America. Now, many, as they cite causes for the war, will claim that it was really over states' rights or trade or economic irregularities. The primary instigation of the Civil War here in the United States was the issue of slavery. The issue of slavery has been a source of conflict since the founding of this country. During the writing of the Constitution in 1789, abolitionists from New England sought to put a ban on slavery into the Constitution, much to the dismay of southern states who already saw slavery as a defining aspect of Southern life. In an attempt at compromise to keep the new fledgling union together, those at the Constitutional Convention decided that the question of slavery would be left up to the states, and not a question that would be anyone. And in that compromise, in many ways, the seeds of the Civil War here in the United States were sown. In many ways, so also were so many of the seeds of our current state of disorder. The last 2 weeks have been particularly tough for the United States as a nation. 2 more unarmed black men were killed at the hands of white police officers. And then in Dallas, police officers were gunned down in cold blood by black men. In the wake of all these sorts of reactions that bubbled to the surface, in Illinois, a former congressman threatened the life of not only Black Lives Matter protesters, but also of our president over Twitter, with the promise of something akin to a race war. And over the last week or so, there have also been more visible presence of groups like the New Black Panther Party. For as much as the Civil War's powder keg was the issue of slavery, really the product, I think, of something bigger. Something older than even the United States. It was an example of a dangerous form of identity politics. When issues come to define particular groups of people, as slavery did for white people in southern states, but also, I might add, people in New York City. It was an identity that became so entrenched in a particular point of view or a specific experience of the world that people find themselves willing to die, and in many cases willing to kill others for their cause, for their identity. So sure of their convictions because it becomes a definition of who they are. It becomes their perceived strength, something to boast about. The identity divisions that seem to be emerging in today's current political climate seems to also echo the very similar identity divisions that sparked the Civil War almost exactly 155 years ago. Now, while I was in Manassas and stood there on Henry Hill and surveyed the battlefield at Bull Run last Sunday, manicured, I might add, to look pretty much exactly as it did in the July of 1861. I couldn't help but think of the death, the violence of the nearly 1,500 men who gave their lives in that space, in the field that I was standing in. Fighting because white folks thought their strength and their identity came from their race, and were convinced of their strength that they were unable to acknowledge the humanity of people because they had a different skin color. As I stood on that hill, I couldn't help but lament the divisions that are still occurring today. Divisions that still seem to cement themselves along lines of race. I lamented the inequalities that still exist today. of the fragility of strong, young black men in a society that touts to have learned its lesson from the blood spilled during the Civil War. I couldn't help but think that so much of that blood was spilled for naught. For yes, slavery is ended, and that is certainly a good thing. But many of the same boundaries of identity that caused the war in the first place still exist. The underlying issues remain unchanged to a certain degree. An issue that has been in the United States since its very founding, when at the same moment Thomas Jefferson was able to pen the bold statement that all men are created equal, he himself owned slaves. I came across a quote by Frederick Douglass, who was born as a slave right here in the state of Maryland, about an hour and a half to the east of here. And it's a quote that he spoke at the 1876 Republican Convention in Cincinnati, Ohio. So I felt it was appropriate, considering the Republican Convention will be coming up this week. And Frederick Douglass surely spoke this to a majority white audience. That seems to summarize the reality of an unfinished war, and I start now with Douglass's quote. You say you have emancipated us. You have, and I thank you for it. You say you have enfranchised us. You have, and I thank you for it. But what is your emancipation? What is your enfranchisement? What does it all amount to? If the black man, after having been made free by the letter of your law, is unable to exercise that freedom, and after having been freed from the slaveholder's lash, he is subject to the slaveholder's shotgun. This is the paradox of America. Race is at the center of America's split personality. Race, something that is at the same time created, but absolutely real. And something that has been present since pretty much day one of the founding of this nation. And it is an immensely strange paradox that for a country whose true strength, I believe, is its freedoms and its diversity, that one of its central weaknesses is inequality and nativism. It being a paradox means that at the same time, America has been and continues to be an inspiration for freedom, equality, and greater democracy around the world. It can suffer at the exact same time from growing isolationism and polarization. It means that, yes, our police forces do need to engage in reformation efforts, but it also means that the Dallas police chief is correct in saying that too much is placed on our police officers today. It means that standing with a movement like Black Lives Matter does not imply that somehow other lives don't matter or are less important. It means we can mourn Alton Sterling and Philander Castile and lament their treatment in an unjust system, while still mourning for the lives of the officers killed in Dallas, lamenting the reality of violence police officers face day to day. No one has to choose one or the other. The paradox of America does not cancel itself out. It is not one or the other. As Paul wrote to the Corinthians nearly 2,000 years ago, Paul was very aware of this nature of paradox. Paul was aware that something that he loved could also hold in it flaws, and that by acknowledging those flaws, he was able to love that thing all the more. Specifically, Paul loved Judaism. He was a student of his religion. He also saw the ways that it went astray. He witnessed it over and over again, being stoned by groups from synagogues. The ways his religion was human in nature, along with holding within it the divine. Paul's last letter that he wrote, that we have a copy of, his letter to the Romans, still extols the virtues of Judaism. This after successive years of persecution at the hand of Jewish leaders. And maybe more importantly, the paradox, maybe more important than the paradox he witnessed in his own religion, Paul saw the paradox that existed within himself. He knew he was making a difference in the world, but at the very same time he was aware of his own faults and his own imperfections. For him, he could boast of all the people that he had converted to Christ. He could boast of his genius for logical argument. He could boast of his commitment to living a life in Christ, or in his ability to heal people, as we see in our Acts passage today. But instead, he chose to boast of his weakness. Just before, a few lines before we get to our Corinthian text today, we see him boasting not only of the thorn in the side which he cannot remove, but he chose to boast of the number of times he had been flogged or stoned or left for dead. The number of times he had been in jail, the number of times he had almost died for the lack of food, of his shipwrecks, of all the times that he got it wrong. He wished for reconciliation, and in his eyes, the sort of conflicts that emerged throughout the book of Acts, I have to imagine he saw those as his own weakness. And instead of trying to bury that weakness, he chose to acknowledge it, to embrace it. Because to him it was a sign of his need for grace. As he states so eloquently something that was revealed to him in prayer, God's grace is sufficient, even in the midst of his shortcomings. Maybe it is human nature to boast, if human nature can actually be separated from cultural norms. But there certainly seems to be a lot of boasting these days. Claims of knowing how to make America great, what the country needs, what the real America is. But to me, if America really is to be great, it needs to take Paul's lead and discover its strength and weakness, in acknowledging its shortcomings, particularly around inequality and race, while still committing itself to strive for greater freedom, inclusion, equality, and justice, the very ideals on which this nation was founded. In other words, I think it's important for the United States to embrace its own paradox. To not try to claim racism doesn't exist anymore. And to commit to movements like Black Lives Matter, while at the same time talking about how police officers have been forced to take on too much. That the two issues can occur at the same time, and that they don't have to cancel each other out. That as a nation we can strive to live into the beloved community that acknowledges its own brokenness and where healing is still needed. To become a community that acknowledges the need for God's grace and for God's love. The challenge of paradoxes is in the fact that they really don't make a whole lot of sense. You can't rationally get your mind around a paradox very effectively, at least not on a human level. But in God, there is a wideness that can encapsulate the paradoxes of the world, that sees something bigger, that is willing to forgive inconsistencies. Again, as Paul found through prayerful revelation, God's grace is truly sufficient. And as there are paradoxes on the cultural level, there are paradoxes within individuals as well. I think every person is full of paradoxes, of seemingly unreconcilable contradictions. And true strength, the strength in the way Paul talked about strength, the strength it takes to heal, the strength it takes to share God's love with so many. It comes when people are willing to acknowledge these internal paradoxes, when they are willing to acknowledge a need for grace, and that trusting in grace and not one's identity is what leads to healing. To me, this is the resounding good news of these passages. That even in one's weakness, God's grace is still available. It's a powerful thought that even in brokenness, one can still be led by the Spirit. And that oftentimes it is that very brokenness that can be transformed into the greatest of strengths. I truly believe that when one is in Christ, striving to embrace the fullness of the divine, that the battlefields of life, whether they're out in the world or whether they're inside one's soul, that they might be avoided by acknowledging weakness, discovering God's grace,